Hello, thanks for joining me today. This is Danny and welcome back to my modded 1.10.2 series. Today we are going to be playing around with advanced generators and generating tons and tons of RF because we don't have enough ways to generate RF yet. Wait a minute. The advanced generators mod gives us 4 different multi-block structures. And all these different blocks that we use to make those multi-block structures. And these multi-block structures are extremely flexible, they're completely freeform, and they're very expandable. So we can generate a whole lot of RF using a whole lot of different materials, such as lava and water to produce steam. Or if there are other mods that produce steam, we can use that as well. We can also produce RF from various different fluid fuels, such as the biodiesel that we get from immersive engineering that we've set up in here. We can also use the oil that we produce from actual additions from our canola oil when we ferment that into oil. And then we also, and we can also use rocket fuel from Ender.io, which we are already making in here, and that produces quite a bit of RF for us. And then additionally, Advanced Generators itself has a fuel called Syngas, which we can make from any carbon burning things such as charcoal, coal, or whatever. Which is great because we are producing tons of that stuff. Let's get started with a gas turbine generator, since we already have some fuels that we can use to power that. First of all, we're going to need a gas turbine controller, and that is this guy right here, and we only need one of these. So we're going to have to make some iron tubing and redstone, and then these iron frames, and I believe we're going to be using a lot of these iron frames. So I'm just going to make a stack of those. We've got so much freaking iron anyway, so that's not a problem. And we'll make 16 of those guys and 16 of these. And a control circuit. I don't know how many of those we're going to need. I guess we'll find out in a second. So that's our first piece. And then we're going to need some turbines. Now, the more turbines that we give this thing, the more RF it can potentially produce, and the more fuel it can potentially burn. There are multiple different types of turbines. We've got an iron turbine, we've got a MacLeod turbine, and we've got a steel turbine. And we can see when we hover over these that our iron produces up to 100, that's our first tier. Steel produces up to 200. Gold-plated 150, bronze 200, and then MacLeod is 500 RF per tick. Now what's great about these guys is we can start with an iron turbine. So if we're early game and we don't have a lot of these other materials, I wonder what kind of steel this uses. Okay, so it actually uses Neotech steel or immersive engineering. That's cool. And depending on what mods you have installed, you're going to see different options here. If you have thermal expansion, you'll see the thermal expansion metals and so on and so forth. Oh, we can also do vibrant. That's interesting. And the only difference is the turbine rotor. So let's say we want to start with iron. So we make a bunch of these iron turbine blades. And we make our turbine rotor. And then we make this. So all the recipes are exactly the same. The redstone, the tubing, the iron tubing, and then the iron frame. The only difference is the rotor in the middle. And we can set this guy down in the world. And then if we decide later on in the game that we want something a little bit better than that, we can actually upgrade it. Okay, so I'm going to make a couple of those, and whoops, we'll make our vibrant turbine rotor, and then we're going to make one of these upgrade kits. Well, actually, we're going to make 32 of these upgrade kits, because that's how they work. Boom, and then we have a vibrant turbine upgrade kit. So at any point in the future, we can decide that we want to shift right-click on our turbine, and we get our iron turbine rotor back, and it replaces it with the vibrant turbine rotor. So this is now a vibrant turbine. Then we're going to need at least one fuel tank, and we can have up to 10 of these, and each one will store 16 buckets of fuel. So the more we put in there, obviously, the more fuel our turbine will store. And then we need up to 10 power capacitors. And these, as you might guess, will store power for us. So again, we've got a basic power capacitor. This is using, oh look at that, it's using NRIO recipes, basic capacitor. And then this one is the double layer, and it uses the basic capacitor, so we can upgrade that. This will determine how much RF our machine stores. So there's that. So we'll just start with 1 million. Honestly, it doesn't matter much to me how much the machine stores, because we have external storage for RF. And then we need up to 4 fluid intake valves. This is where we're going to be pumping fuel, of course. And we could be pumping it in from multiple sources and have multiple intake valves if we wanted to. And then we need an output module. And in this version, there are 2 of them, I believe. I believe there are only 2 different. In the 1.7.10 version, there are a few more because there's integration with more mods. But basically, we have an RF one. That's the flux generator. And of course, this is the one that we're going to be using. And then the other one is the energy emitter, which I believe outputs EU. We won't be using this. In fact, there isn't even a recipe for it. And that's probably because we don't have IC2 installed on this in this pack. So there's our power I/O module, and there's our flux generator. And we can put a sensor module, which will output a redstone signal based on, it has a little GUI, and we can change what it's going to output a redstone signal for. I don't think we're going to need that in our situation, but maybe we'll just make one just so that we can kind of take a look at it and see how it works. And then up to 10 control modules. Now these are going to allow us to input redstone to control different aspects of the machine, to turn it on, turn it off, that sort of thing. This we will most likely have use for in our particular build. And then finally, we have some efficiency upgrades that we can add to make this guy more efficient. And there are 2 of them. One of them is the fuel air mixer. That's this guy. Let's see. And this will increase fuel efficiency to 135%. It's basically going to stretch out our fuel a little bit so that we get more RF out of our fuel. And then we can stretch it even further, the gas mix compressor. And this guy will increase our fuel efficiency up to 185 if we also have a fuel air mixer. So this thing is useless without the fuel air mixer. So this is like kind of our tier 1, and then this is like our tier 2. So, oh boy. So I'll do that off camera, but basically we need 8 vibrant alloys and one of our pressure valves that we just made before. It's quite slow, as you can see, despite the fact that we have an octadic capacitor in here. So this is basically the maximum speed that we can get. Put that right there, right in the middle of the floor. Why not? Actually, yeah, whatever. So then our minimum stuff that we're going to need, we're going to need some way to get fluid into this guy. And I am going to put that right there. And you can see it has a connected texture. And then we got our turbine right there. That's our minimum. So actually right now, we can generate some RF. And we'll be good to go. However, we have no way of getting the RF out of there. So we're definitely going to need our... we don't have any way of storing energy in there. So let's do that. So now we can see we have an energy buffer of 1.1 million RF because actually, you know what? This is not required because we have built in to the turbine controller, we already have 100,000 RF. Storage for 100,000 RF. So when we add this tank, we're adding 1 million RF of storage. So 1.1 million RF. Let's see, and then a fuel tank. So right now we can store, oh, it doesn't say. None. We probably can't store anything in here at the moment. Oh, it doesn't say. Okay, whatever. Our flex generator is where we're going to output RF. I'm going to put my turbine back here. Redstone control module. Okay, so I've got a pressurized fluid conduit. Okay, so we're going to hit this guy. This is where our rocket fuel is coming from. We're going to hit that guy right there. So it should start piping rocket fuel into this guy. So you can see we can store 17,000 millibuckets. And we are currently producing 500 RF per tick. Nice. And we're filling up our buffer. We can add these guys to increase our efficiency. So I'm just going to put that there. And now if we look at it, we should see... No, we can't, because it's not generating RF right now. But whatever. So let's pull some RF out of this thing so that we can actually see it running. Okay. So we are extracting. We'll just do always active for now, although I will change that eventually. So now we should start seeing stuff getting pulled out. Alright, so I've got a lever here. If we turn that on, we should start generating RF again. So we can see how much fuel we're consuming. Peak fuel consumption, fuel efficiency 185% now. And we might also notice that if we remove that and we run this guy, we'll see that we are using 0.2 to 0.5 millibuckets per tick as we generate 500 RF per tick. We put this guy back on here. We will see we are now only using 15 to 30, 0.15 to 0.30 millibuckets per tick, but we're still generating 500 RF per tick. So what happens if we want to generate more power than that? Well, there's an easy way. And that is just simply to add more turbines. And we can put it anywhere, whatever. It's a freeform multi-block structure. So we're now producing 600 RF per tick, and we're using a little bit more fuel. So this is ridiculously easy to upgrade. So what I want to do next is I want to produce some syngas, because this stuff will allow us to produce, it's about the same as the rocket fuel. In fact, I think it's slightly less RF per tick, which is just fine. But what's great about it is that we can make it using coal and charcoal and anything that we can put in a furnace. Similarly, we start with a controller, so we have to have one controller per machine. And then we need at least one mixing chamber and up to 25. So as you might guess, the more we have, the faster it's going to work. So the more fuel it's going to produce for us. So we'll start with one. And then if we're not piping in steam, we need a heating chamber, which will allow us to produce steam from within. Up to 5 of these item input ports, which is what we're going to use to pipe the coal into it. We could use a fluid intake valve if we want to produce steam externally. We could make the heat exchanger multi-block, which we might do today, but first we'll produce the steam internally, so we won't worry about that. We definitely need at least one fluid output valve so that we can get the fuel out of here. Here's our Syngas producer. If we right click on it, it's going to say it's incomplete, it requires at least one mixing chamber. So there's our mixing chamber. And we can actually right click on this now, but it's empty. We have no water in here. We have to pipe water into this guy and items. So we give it water to produce steam. Give it the heating chamber. And then we need the item input port. I'm actually going to put that in the floor because we'll be importing items from down here. And sensor fluid output. I've got these two machines next to each other now, and it actually works pretty well. When you place blocks that can connect to either machine, though, it won't let you place them like right next to each other. So like if I tried to put a fluid intake valve right here in this block, which I did, it wouldn't let me because it could have connected to either one. So I place this one first, and then I place this item input port here, which cannot connect to the gas turbine. So just something to keep in mind when designing your build. Here's how this guy works. It uses coal to heat up our water to produce steam, and then it uses the steam and mixes it with the carbon from the coal to produce syngas. So if we were to pipe steam into this thing from some other machine, like one that uses lava to produce steam, we wouldn't need to consume charcoal in order to produce the actual steam. We would only use the charcoal to produce the syngas with the steam. Because we're using charcoal with our heating chamber, we're actually producing more steam than we need for a mixing chamber, for a single mixing chamber. So we're kind of wasting steam. I mean, we're kind of wasting charcoal right now. It's not the most efficient because we're using 50 carbon per tick, regardless of the fact that we're not necessarily using all that steam. So the best ratio is 1 to 5. So I made 4 more mixing chambers. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So now we're going to produce syngas a lot faster, but we're still using the same amount of charcoal for producing steam. However, we're using more charcoal to produce syngas. This guy is totally filled up with syngas, so we can see right now it is only using 0.4 carbon per tick. Even though we're not producing anything in this machine right now, it's using that little bit of carbon per tick in order to just maintain this temperature. If we don't want that to happen, we could use the control, like this guy, this redstone control module. If we put a redstone control module on here, we can have it turn off and on when we want it to. Like maybe we could just have it, but one thing you do have to keep in mind is that once you lose that heat, there's an overhead in warming it up again. So you're going to end up using a couple pieces of charcoal just to get the thing warm again. So it really all depends how much this thing is going to be used. So if you're going to go long periods of time without using it, then you're probably going to want to have it turn that off. For now, I'm just going to leave it as it is, and then we're going to start piping. Oh, let's see, how are we doing here? Oh crap, we're still burning rocket fuel. Now we've got all the syngas, we've burned up all our rocket fuel, so now I'm going to start piping this out from our fluid output valve. You can see it's already filling up the pipe into our fluid intake valve over here. So this is going to be an insert. That is an extract. Active with signal. I don't know why that doesn't seem to be working lately, but okay. And then we gotta hit this with our pipe. I mean with our wrench. So we now should see that we've got syngas in here. And we're producing 600 RF per tick. So there we go. We are using a little bit more fuel. We're using 0.32 because the syngas isn't quite as efficient as rocket fuel. But it is still very efficient. And if we look over here, we should see that this guy is now producing syngas again. And using charcoal, and we're now up to 250 carbon per tick. Hooray! But one thing to keep in mind is that if you do pick up the controller, you will lose all your inventory. You can pick up pretty much any other blocks, and it'll be fine. I don't know what happens if you pick up the tank, though. I didn't try that. Now producing 600 RF per tick, basically from coal. That's all we've got in here is coal. That's what we're burning. And water, but yeah. All right, let's make some steam. Well, let's make a machine that we already made steam, but let's make a machine that makes steam. That does nothing but make steam. And that would be the heat exchanger controller. Actually, this thing does make other things. It's a heat exchanger, so it'll do a lot of different things. You can make obsidian with it. You can, in fact, I think we're going to end up with obsidian as a byproduct, if I remember correctly. We're going to need a heat exchanger and fluid intake valves. I'm just going to make one of these because we can actually input on all sides. Well, except the side that's connected to the rest of the machine. So we're going to be inputting water on one side and lava on the other side. So we're going to need a fluid output, of course, so that we can output the steam. Just like the other ones, we can also do sensor modules and control modules. I'm not going to bother with that right away. So first of all, I'm just going to put a hole in the floor. Oh boy. So we've got to get water and lava. We can actually get lava right from there. So maybe what I'm going to do is put our intake valve here. We can pipe in water through there, and we can pipe in the lava from here. And then we need our controller. I'm just going to put that right there. And we already have our multi-block, but we need a heat exchanger. At least one heat exchanger. I'm going to put another hole in the floor. And right here we are going to put our fluid output valve. So that's how we're going to pipe the steam out. Silly butterflies. And that is actually all we need. Got lava coming in here in the fluid intake valve. I've got water coming in down here in the fluid intake valve. You do have to be careful about the output valve, because if this pipe connects to the output valve, it's actually going to start inputting into that valve, and stuff will end up in the output tank. So like for instance, I had water in the output tank before. Well, first I had lava in the output tank because I ran this past that output valve when it was up there. So then I decided to move the valve down here, and I didn't realize that it had connected to this. So if that ever happens to you, all you have to do is click this button to clear the internal buffers. You're basically going to void everything that's in there. But yeah, so similar to the situation that we had over here, where it's always using charcoal even when it's not producing syngas. Of course now it is producing it, but it's only producing a little bit. We have a similar situation here where it's always going to produce, or it's always going to use a little bit of lava in order to keep the current temperature. So you can set up some kind of control to turn that on and off. But again, keep in mind that you have to use lava in order to heat things up. So if you're turning it off and turning it on all the time, you're going to lose, it's going to be less efficient. To pipe the steam into here so that we can get rid of our heating chamber. And then we no longer need to consume charcoal in order to maintain heat in this thing. Hooray! We have steam coming in here now. So we no longer have to worry about heat in this guy. There's no heating chamber installed. So we don't have to pipe water in it anymore. We only have to pipe in steam. And then it's going to produce our syngas. I ended up having to clear the inventory though of all that water. Because I didn't let it burn the water first before I removed the heat exchanger. One more thing we're going to want to add to this guy is this, an item output port, so that we can extract the obsidian. So that doesn't get filled up. It seems that the item conduits cannot pull from the output port. So I put a chest there, and it drops the stuff into a chest, which is kind of nice. Although it would be nice if I didn't have to put a chest there. But anyway, I'm just extracting from the chest now, so whatever. Either way, we got our obsidian out of the machine. Now that we're producing all this steam, let's maybe do something with it. I'm going to grab another fluid output because I have a steam turbine in here, and we can set this output right here, and it should connect right to our steam engine's input. So here's our steam turbine. It's a steam turbine controller. And it's got a rotor. This guy's outputting steam. It's got a rotor just like the gas generator, and we can put a bunch of them on. This one's generating 78 RF per tick right now. It's got a maximum of 500. It's gaining speed as it's getting steam. And we're gradually increasing the amount of RF that we're producing. So obviously this thing's it's gonna take a while to get to that point, to the point where it's maxed out, and this is something that you would probably want to keep running for long periods of time. There's a lot of overhead with starting it and stopping it. So to keep up with this vibrant turbine, we need a lot of freaking steam, and right now I've got 3 heat exchangers on here. We're producing 202 millibuckets of steam. 1.6 millibuckets of lava is being consumed per tick. I don't think I want that. I don't think I want to be using that much lava and water and producing that much obsidian. I actually ended up having to expand on my my reservoir down here because it wasn't keeping up. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this guy And I'm gonna just exchange it for that one. And we'll put the vibrant turbine in here. So this guy will start producing a lot more RF. It's gonna be using more syngas, but we have so much of the resources that we need to produce this stuff, so we should be in pretty good shape. And we'll see if this guy will keep up or not. We've got all these mixing chambers. We probably don't even need that many mixing chambers anymore now that we're not, now that we're using steam for other stuff as well. So let's see how many heat exchangers we can get away with now. So we're full of steam right away. This guy is having no trouble keeping up. So let's get rid of that. Still having no trouble keeping up. Let's get rid of that. Okay, we're still doing... no, we're not. So one's not enough and two is too many. I may actually just disable this eventually and go back to using the heating chamber over here. Just because charcoal is something that we have in great abundance. Whereas lava, we've got a lot of it, but this thing is using about 1 bucket of lava every 45 seconds. So that's a lot of lava, and it's a lot of obsidian that we're accumulating too. 1 piece every 45 seconds. And yeah, and if we get rid of the heat exchanger and stop using our steam turbine, we'll be using a bucket of lava about every minute and a half. So it's still quite a bit of lava. So I'm not sure that's really worthwhile, at least in my situation. However, charcoal is just something that, like I said, I have in great abundance, and this gas turbine is pretty freaking awesome, and I think I may actually expand on it in the future. And of course, it's so easy to expand on. This is very scalable, and I mean, we could produce thousands and thousands of RF per tick with this thing. In fact, we can have up to 50 turbines. That would be 25,000 RF per tick. Just a few numbers, a few calculations that I came up with. Our Syngas producer produces about 1 bucket of Syngas for every 31.25 pieces of charcoal. So it takes a little over 31, almost a half a stack of charcoal to make a bucket of syngas. Because as it's showing us, uses about 30 carbon per tick to produce 0.6 millibuckets per tick. So that ends up being about just over 31 charcoal. This guy produces about 1.8 million RF per bucket, which in the end means about 59 to 60,000 RF per charcoal, which is pretty efficient, but it's actually not as efficient as our Stirling generators with octadic capacitors. You put an octadic capacitor in a Stirling generator and you're getting 83,360 RF per piece of charcoal. So you're actually getting more RF per piece of charcoal with your Stirling generators than you are with Syngas. Don't have any capacitors at all. Then we're only getting 16,000 RF per charcoal. So just so you know, your Stirling generators are fairly inefficient unless you give them these octadic capacitors, and then they become even more efficient than the gas turbine. Ender IO is getting about 1,120,000 RF per bucket of rocket fuel. That happens to be exactly how much our gas turbine controller will get. So it's a 1-to-1 match. Possibly in the next episode, possibly shortly thereafter, I am planning on starting another build. So we've got our little town here, and this is mostly our tech stuff. We've got RF generation over there in those 2 buildings. Lots of different RF generation. We've got this farming and stuff, and we've got trading going on over there in our little shops, and RF Tools Dimensions going on up there. But one of the things that I've been trying to do with RF Tools Dimensions is to make kind of a fantasy dimension, and we did one in our RF Tools Dimensions episode that I think might work out for us. And what I was kind of thinking of doing was like some kind of a magical build, something definitely out of my comfort zone, and which I always love to do. And to move our big mess over there across the river, we've got the dirty neighbors across the river. To move that mess into something a little bit nicer looking, and maybe even kind of in preparation for some of the future stuff that we're gonna be doing with blood magic. Maybe come up with a place for our demon invasion when that is finally added to the mod, and that sort of thing. So that is definitely one of my plans for sometime in the near future. I'm not sure if that's going to be in the next episode or a few episodes later, but I do hope you join me for that. And of course, if you do have any questions or comments about what we did today, or anything else for that matter, please feel free to leave them in the comment section below. And of course, if you enjoyed this, don't forget to click the like button. And to join me next time. Thanks for watching.